Hello, everyone. This is Jason from the Frosty Canucks podcast with a different intro because he just chose that. And I'm joined today, Steve.
Yo, what's up? It's your boy, Steve, here on the Frosty Canucks. We did not discuss that intro change. That was even a surprise for me. So
it's the end of the year. Do I really want to remember 2021?
No. Fuck this year.
It's like last year, but only a little bit better.
I honestly feel like this year was worse than last year, just in general.
Why? Just because we had like that little bit of like January to part of March where we were all still happy?
Yeah, like just in 2020, it was... You get to experience the roller coaster of madness, but by the time it's 2021, it's like, okay, we've already been through like 9 months of this shit, 10 months of this shit, and this is like 12 more months of shit. Oh man, I'm just so fucking just tired.
We're all tired.
It's just hard to keep plugging away. And if we have another 12 months of it, then 2022 will be even worse, because it's so exhausting. And I feel like that's a sentiment that a lot of people have. It's just that you can't use that as an excuse for slipping up or doing things that potentially get you the coof.
Yeah, I sadly got some family members who have now contracted it, which that's no good.
I mean, we already had family members who had contracted it, but...
Well, I met on my mom's side now, so...
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, it's like my sister had it, but she is a nurse, so it's like, okay, so like my sister who works in the front line of COVID got COVID. It's like, yeah, that's okay.
Shocking.
Sure. Like, I would be more surprised if she hadn't gotten it. Fuck, that was like a year ago now. I don't know if she'll get hit with a new version of it or whatever, but...
At this rate, we're all going to.
Yeah, well, just before we started the podcast, I was saying, like, the only way out is if this thing continues to mutate and like become less aggressive and less killy and just becomes like the flu, and then we just get a flu shot for it every single year. That's the only way that this ever ends. We can't get rid of it because economy, and also because stupid. So like the economy is the government's fault, and the stupid is partly the government's fault, but mostly the population's fault.
You're not wrong. I mean, technically, if everyone just self-isolated for a month away from everyone, did nothing, it'd be gone, but...
Yeah, but that's never gonna happen. People are like, oh, I'm at home all the time and I'm bored. We're social creatures, so they're like, I gotta go out, I gotta talk to people, because that's just it. When they were doing like the real-ass lockdown in 2020, like, I swear to Christ, it didn't matter what time of year it was. I kept seeing people, like, fucking partying and chatting and shit in their backyards with other people, and I'm like, get the fuck out of here, you dickweeds.
Yeah.
And I know people are like, it's always the young people. And I'm like, bitch, I saw like a bunch of boomer-ass people doing this shit. It's not young or old. It's just stupid
it's my time to go. I'm religious, blah, 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 blah. I won't wear a mask in church. It's not letting me be close to God or something like that.
Oh, man, I want a church. So there's a church that's like Oh, wait, I can't say. I want the church that is a block away from Miranda's house to be displaced from that location. I don't care how it gets displaced, but I want for it to be displaced. Just people always go in there and they come out there not wearing fucking masks, first of all. They're all old as fuck, too. And secondly, these dickweeds park all over the road. It's legal in my city to do that for like 90% of the year. The entire road is just full of these church people's parking all Sunday morning. And I'm like, get the fuck out of here, man.
I know what you mean. Sarah's had like a religious establishment somewhere. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I was like, I can't find a parking spot. Jesus.
Well, it's not even just that. It's like just with how narrow the streets are in like poor old neighborhoods anyway. It's just like, God, there's like not enough room to even fucking get out of your fucking driveway sometimes, right? Like these dickheads are like, they're like, oh, I'm parked in the spot I'm supposed to be. And I'm like, man, you got like 3 or 4 inches of your bumper sticking out in front of the driveway. Like, get the hell out of here. Your fucking car that's too big for the city in the first place, and that you drive alone. Because why are you driving a giant SUV alone in the city? What is the point of having that vehicle? Oh, I hate old people. I hate people who go to church. Let's just say that. Like, there's a certain type of person who goes to church, and they're usually the opposite of the way you think they would be.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Like, you'd think that people, oh, they listen to, like, the word of God, and it's like, oh, there's all these, like, really like, 'cause religion fundamentally, I know because I have lightly studied a number of different religions. Fundamentally, all of the religions teach the same shit, which is to treat other people with dignity and respect. And I don't know what is wrong with these people, but it seems like specifically, like, white, old Christian people seem to have missed the entire point of the New Testament.
I know what you mean.
And I'm like, how do you go to the church every Sunday and, like, not... How have you never learned that the whole, like, premise, like, the whole teaching of Jesus was just treat others with dignity and respect?
No, you're different. How dare you?
Like, oh, but what if they're black? Well, Jesus said treat everyone with dignity and respect. What if they're gay? Did he stutter? Like, fucking, like... This is one of my favorite images. One of my buddies, he was a younger person who would go to church, and he always got really upset with the old people, and he shows this picture where Jesus was like, treat everyone with love and respect, and then someone in the crowd's like, what about the gays? And Jesus replies, I fucking stutter. And it's like, yeah, like, just, what the fuck? And I know we have some listeners who this specifically is probably going to be like really relatable, and it might be part of why they decided to change their opinions about religion at some point in their lives. I also came from well, sort of. My parents aren't like super religious, but my grandparents, at least on the one side, are super duper religious. And, some of our cousins are, for some reason, a little, well, they were at least for a bit, but they're like
quasi, sort of.
Yeah, it's like one of those things where it's like, you do it to keep up appearances until everyone collectively decides they just don't give a shit.
I go to Christmas service every year, and it's like, what about all the other services?
Christmas and Easter, they're a twice-a-year Christian, right? Like,
I don't know much about religion, but I don't know if that's how it works.
Well, yeah. Anyway, this is a podcast about video games. It is the final episode of the year. We're recording on the 23rd. This will be out on the 29th. It's just ahead of 2022. Fuck 2021. But as a send-off to the year, we're going to do what every good video game content creators do, and we're going to talk about our favorite games from the year.
Because there's not enough time to play another one for the rest of the year.
I'm still finishing up Deus Ex, and I'll probably start Breath of the Wild, but I don't think I'll finish it before the new year.
Are you liking Deus Ex?
I posted something earlier today. It's 2 screenshots and then a caption, and I think it pretty accurately summarizes how I play this video game. So I'm just going to post the Twitter link here because I don't know if you've seen it. The first screenshot there, as you can see, is a bunch of armed men passed out, all stacked on top of each other in toilet stall.
Non-lethal, perfect.
And then the second image is the bathroom door to that toilet stall has now been shut, and I put a giant refrigerator-sized crate in front of the door so that they can't get out. It's also the women's washroom, which I'm just noticing now. I didn't realize that I stacked them all in the women's washroom. And then the caption is, this is how I play games. Or this is how I play video games.
They're going to have a lot of explaining to do when they wake up.
Yeah, I didn't take another screenshot, but I also threw both of their bosses in with them. So... I'm fucking insane.
That's okay. That's what those games are for.
It's a fun game. It's not my favorite immersive sim type game. I liked Prey and Hitman games better. The thing that kind of gets me with this is there's like some RPG-ish bits in it, and I really don't care as much about them because the game is so overtly goofy with how it lets you solve problems that when they have like the really serious conversations with the RPG, like that, that fucking... Mm-hmm. There's a name for it when they have the two characters trees? Like looking at each other. Not dialogue trees. It's a film technique, and they use it in video games where the two characters are talking to each other. A shot reverse shot. That's what it is. So they do like the shot reverse shot conversations where it goes back and forth and it keeps changing the perspective depending on who's talking. I don't like those moments very much because that's just, I don't know, it's kind of boring. Especially given that the story in this game is like extraordinarily stupid. What they're going for, it was a noble effort, but especially after what happened last year with the Black Lives Matter movements and the protests and all like the fucking terrible shit that the police were doing, especially in the United States, the whole like Augs Live Matters thing that they did with this game feels like super duper, just like really, really insensitive and really tasteless. Because it's like, oh yeah, it's totally comparable. These people who have machine limbs, who can see through walls, turn invisible, casually lift refrigerators, jump 16 feet in the air, do lethal and non-lethal takedowns. Jensen's basically a superhero. He can go around and just kill entire armies worth of people. it's really hard to take the whole like, oh yeah, the augmented are being oppressed message seriously when it's like, these people are basically superhumans, and that's not at all remotely comparable to the power dynamic of what this game is trying to like simulate. It's extremely tasteless, I think. I say that, but at the same time, I'm like, well, I'd rather them make a game that's actually trying to say something and completely fuck it up than just put out a game that says nothing, which is what like most AAA games do. So I don't know if it's better to
try and fail,
yeah, to try and fail than to just not even try it, like to just be Ubisoft and just like not try at all, or EA and just like not try at all, or Activision and not try at all.
Ubisoft tries. They got their little thing on the front of each of their games saying this game was made by a
diverse team of whatever the fucks, and then you play yeah, and then you play a game that feels like a bunch of old white men, like it had to go through several revisions based on the feedback from a bunch of old white men who haven't interacted with the real world in like 25 years. Instead, they just ride helicopters to and from the office every day.
They need NFTs and more in our company.
Yeah, but like the game, when you're actually playing the game, is pretty fun. It has a few too many breaks for these RPG type things, and the story is just really, really overtly bad. But anyway, that's not a game of the year contender, not at all. It would be if it wasn't so shit on the story regard, because the gameplay is really fun. So
or finished.
Yeah, I haven't finished it yet, but I have 4 games here. How many do you have on your short list?
I had 8 contenders, and then I whittled it down to 5.
Okay, so I do have 7 games that are going to be on the end of the year post, but I'm sure this isn't going to come as a surprise because Jason talked about Lost Judgment, which was the only game from 2021 that he actually played. I am just going to be sharing the picks that I have that came out this year, and he's going to share his just in general. And that way we have some coverage for games that actually came out this year. If you want to know about the games that I like that didn't come out this year, I'm sure they're all obvious. You can check out the post that I will have out in the new year. But for now, I guess since you have 5, we'll start with you. So Jason, what's your first pick for Game of the Year 2021?
Resident Evil 7, not 7.
I am unsurprised, and I've actually played this game.
Mm-hmm. That we have.
So why don't you walk us through Resident Evil? It's not Village. Village was 8.
Village
right?
was 8.
Yeah. Walk us through Resident Evil Biohazard.
A perfect comeback for Capcom into the Resident Evil universe is what I'll say to that. It's just this perfect game where the pacing is so great in this game, where it's the tense moments and then followed by a little bit of a lull. The monsters are decent, but obviously the stars of the show is the Baker family, and having to deal with each of them in certain parts of the house over the course of the game. Each of them kind of brings a little bit something different to the table. Jack is a character that you have to just run away from most of the time and then occasionally fight.
Yeah, he's fucking crazy.
Yeah. The son, I think it's Lucas?
I want to say it was like Lucan or Lucas or something like that, yeah?
Yeah. He keeps taunting you the entire time. Marjorie, she's just this batshit crazy lady who almost kind of seems like she could actually be in the real world and just be like a cat lady, like, stay out! And I feel bad for Jack because, man, that's terrifying. You do get to learn a lot more if you get like the gold edition, which contains some stuff that is like a bit of a semi prequel to the events, so that you find out why the Bakers transformed into these horrifying creatures, or I guess not even that they turned into their horrible creatures, it's more that they turned into evil people. It's only at the end of each of their essentially arcs that you find the monster portion of them. And I mean, Village kind of did the same thing from what I've seen, where a lot of the characters look humanoid and then over the course of the game get more and more grotesque. So I'm glad that the Capcom had success with Village as well. I'm happy that this wasn't a
one-hit wonder?
Yeah, one-hit wonder, yeah. So the campiness of watching VHSs, even though they make absolutely no sense when you think, why the hell is this being recorded? Like, who's recording this during this time? This makes no sense. But the VHSs just give you hints for parts of like how to solve problems and not suffer the consequences of whatever those events are. I'm trying to be vague, but
Yeah, well, it's like a very unobtrusive way of giving hints to the player, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where instead of it being like, oh, hey, like here's some weird shit you had to read. No, it's like here's a VHS tape. You watch it, and you're like, oh shit, I know how to do this thing now. Or you'll see it and be like, what the fuck? And then you'll see it later, and I go, oh wait, I know what to do now.
Mm-hmm.
There's like an entire puzzle. This game will make you play through it the way it's supposed to be done, and then when you get there later, you'll just know what the solution is. So you can just do it immediately.
Mm-hmm.
Which is pretty funny. So
yeah, and the fact that in other playthroughs you don't even have to watch those tapes for the most part, minus the last one.
Yeah, because you just know what the information is already.
Well, the last one is story related, so you have to rewatch that one. It's when you get to the boat, which is unfortunately the part of the game where it suffers because it overstays its welcome, and it's like this weird second act that seems like it's mostly there for padding, unfortunately.
It really does, yeah. I don't know. The story kind of comes to a natural conclusion, and then there's like this.
But wait, there's more.
Yeah, there's like this extra 3-hour bit that's put on to like over-explain why things are the way that they are. It's like a George Lucas problem, right? Where it's like, oh, I gotta over-explain everything instead of just, I could just accept it the way it is. Like, I don't need an explanation for how the Bakers became the way they are. It's just, I could just accept the fact that they were all deranged or whatever.
Because of some like small reason, and that's about it. But
yeah. That was kind of shitty, but other than that, I agree with all the points you've made.
Yeah.
Like, it is an extremely well-paced game.
Most of the bosses are pretty straightforward. The last one's a bit shit as well, so that'll...
Yeah, it's because it's got, like, QTE style stuff in it, which is always lame.
That is very true. I think that's something that they addressed in Village a lot more, especially in regards to the final boss. They definitely did, because that one is way more action-oriented, because Ethan, the wonderful, wonderful protagonist of...
Faceless Man.
Yes. Of these two last Resident Evil games. He's special, but apparently he gets some military training, which is why he's a little bit more agile, a little bit more not shit with the guns. Because, I mean, over time, during those events, like, he is getting a little bit better, but definitely feels clunky with the shotgun or the pistol.
I thought they just did that because games that don't have precise controls are always more scary, because you could get your ass kicked while you fiddle around with the controls.
It might have been that. It might have also just been they made improvements to the gameplay overall. Because it is a very different game in terms of what Resident Evil was before, in terms of it being like first person instead of usually third person over the shoulder. But yeah, it's a great game. I highly recommend it. If you get to that point with the boat and you don't like that, just stop and be like, I liked the whole Baker part. They were cool and terrifying and brought unique things to the table.
Yeah, I think fundamentally, when you feel like the story has concluded, you can probably put the game down. The last 2 or 3 hours is...
okay, but...
it's not very fun.
Yeah, and the semi-automatic gun is a piece of shit.
I don't remember what one that was.
It was the one you got on the boat.
Oh, like, that gun is awful. It does so little damage.
You've got like 100 bullets, and it's like, okay.
It takes all 100 of them to kill one dude. Like, what the fuck?
It's not a good gun to give near the end.
No, because you've been using, like, a pretty powerful shotgun, a fucking pistol or whatever, and, like, they can usually shoot down guys in, like, so the shotgun
1 to 3
take stuff down in, like, 1 to 3 hits. And you get this fucking, like, Uzi, and you're just, like, holding the button down, it's just going, like, brrrr, and it just, like, you just empty an entire clip into the enemy, and they still keep moving. You're like, how many shots does this take? Oh, it's awful.
What is your 2021 game of the year?
So my first pick, I'm not going to do these in order, even though I'm pretty sure everyone is going to know what one of the games on here is. Actually, I think all of them are pretty obvious, but I'm going to start with It Takes Two, because it was the game of the year at the Game Awards. So,
winner.
Good old Joseph, fuck the Oscars. I don't know his last name. This was a joke that I didn't think of before. Yeah, so It Takes Two. It's a game that I saw and was like, ooh, co-op game. Let's play that, Miranda, and we did, and it's extraordinarily good. It's
somehow your relationship is still okay.
Yeah, well, it's like it's not like Portal 2 co-op where I spent the entire time just killing Miranda over and over again. Just incriminate myself on the podcast here.
You've already done that multiple times, so.
Oh, okay. Well, never mind. Then everyone knows I'm a piece of shit. So yeah, It Takes Two. It's a co-op game. I would say that it's mostly a light platformy type game, but I guess similar to Resident Evil, like what you said, it's got a really good sense of pacing. So while platforming is the main thing, like you're always jumping through the levels, and jumping is always a consistent part of your move set. I want to say every about 30 to 45 minutes, the game gives you some kind of new mechanic to play around with for puzzle solving and traversal, just interacting with the world.
Mm-hmm.
And the one thing I think the game does really well is that it switches what type of game each player is playing. So like,
because each of you has a different role in the puzzle.
Yeah, in the first area, the guy has nails, so he throws out nails. It's a bit like a third-person shootery type thing, but you're not really you're shooting them at like things, not enemies. And then the other person's got a hammer, which is strictly platforming related. After that, you both get a gun type weapon for some third-person shooting type stuff, and then you're controlling a boat. The same person who's controlling a boat is controlling a plane, while the other person is playing like Street Fighter and they're fighting a squirrel. I was so jealous that Miranda was playing the character who actually got to do the fighting game part of the game. I was so salty about that. I'm like, oh, I want to do it because I want to kick this squirrel's ass.
I mean, that's cool that it's got enough replayability. So if you wanted to play with someone else,
yeah, you could play
switch
from the other side and you get like a kind of a completely different experience. But yeah, it's just like it's got a really good sense of pacing. So like I said, every 30 to 45 minutes you're kind of being handed a new set of mechanics to work with. And because of that, you can experiment with them and you can have fun with them, but there's never a point in the game where you're like, man, I'm bored of doing this thing. Before you get bored of doing it, it just fucks off and you get like a new thing instead.
Great for our attention spans now.
Yeah, well, and then, like, the entire game is also built around co-op, and I think it does a really good job of designing a game where you need both players to actively cooperate throughout the experience, otherwise they won't progress forward. It's not like Overcooked, where you have to be absolutely militant if you want those 3 stars, right? But you still have a game where you can't play it alone, right? It's just like it's designed around co-op, and it doesn't feel like other games where I think Nintendo's probably the worst offender for this. Where like, oh yeah, there's co-op in this game, but it's the little brother co-op.
Mansion 3.
Yeah, where the second player is like, they're controlling a dumbed down version of the game, while the first player is playing the actual game. Mario Odyssey, they control the cap, for instance, which means that like person who's controlling Mario is fundamentally playing the entire game mostly by themselves while the head just flies around collecting coins.
I mean, Mario Galaxy was just the second player can just point and collect the star bits with the Wiimote, and I'm like,
and shoot them at stuff.
Okay, 2 things.
Completely
Wonderful.
Useless. Completely fucking useless.
You're no kidding.
Yeah, so this game is unlike those games. This is actually a true co-op experience. And the story has some moments to it that I think are pretty good. The scene with Cutie the elephant made me cry. It made me want to die on the inside. Though I don't think that the overarching story does as good of a job as it probably could or should have done. I can't say because I haven't gone through a divorce, but I don't necessarily think the way that the story kind of ends is... It ends in like a very happy-ish way, even though that doesn't necessarily make a whole lot of sense. And it might be a little bit patronizing for someone who's actually been through a divorce, because I get the impression that most divorces are pretty fucking messy. Not everyone ends up being happy afterwards, so...
Yeah, the legal system loves them.
Yeah, but story weaknesses withstanding, I think the game mechanically has a lot to offer. It's genuinely pretty fun, and I think one of the other big things that makes It Takes Two stand out as a pretty outstanding game is that it's very inclusive. What I mean by that is that you can play it with somebody who doesn't really know how to play video games. They can still get through the game. It's extraordinarily forgiving about a lot of things. Like I said, there's like a fighting game part in it, but you just like kind of have to mash the button and you get through it.
I mean, it's also great for anyone who because you only need 1 copy of it.
Yes, that's the other thing. It's true co-op in the sense that you need 1 copy and you can play with the 2 people.
I cannot imagine how much effort it must have been to prove to EA, like, no, fuck you. You buy 1 copy, you're good. Like, I don't know how he got that through.
I also would have loved to have seen or heard the conversation that happened there, because
It's
Yeah,
just
it's
every other word is just followed by "fuck you."
Well, this is like the same company that just refuses to make games that should maybe be free to play. It's very weird to me that this premium game, it always not like a nickel and dime thing where you had to buy 2 copies to actually play it. Or maybe it was a case of like, okay, we'll charge this. We'll charge. Maybe that's why he originally wanted to charge less money for it. But it's like, okay, we can either do like
Double the price, or
double the price and have it be a one and done, or sell it for less, but then you need 2 copies. But based on consumer data, they're probably more likely to buy it if it's a higher price and you only need 1 copy instead of a lower price and needing 2 copies.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, if you haven't checked it out already and you have a significant other who maybe isn't the most coordinated with gaming stuff, they're not the most gamer out there, I still think you'd have fun playing this. Pick it up if you can. It's a pretty fun game.
Mm-hmm. Too bad I can't keep its trademark.
Yeah, let's not talk about that because that's just confusing and stupid.
Fair enough. Shall I move on to my next one?
I would say that yes, you should tell us what the next game on your list is.
Sayonara Wild Hearts.
Wow, I'm so surprised.
Are you?
Not at all.
Yeah, this is one of those great, nice short games to play. Probably like finish the whole campaign or like the levels in about an hour or 2. But it's just, it like you were saying with It Takes Two, it's very well varied, so you're never getting bored of the different types of levels that are being thrown at you and the new mechanic that are constantly being bombarded on you that keeps it nice and well paced. And the fact that it's only like a couple hours long definitely helps with that. The fact that this game acknowledges that and even has modes where it's just play it through the whole game, start to finish in each level, and then a YOLO mode where you only have the 1 life. I think the best I've ever gotten is about 3/4 of the way through, and then I messed up and was like, well, that was fun, but I don't know if I like roguelikes that much. The developers of this definitely did their best to bring their vision to life in terms of this being essentially a pop album.
It's like a video game pop album.
Mm-hmm. And I am not a person who likes playing games multiple times, or I only have like a handful of games that I'll ever like go back and replay.
And sorry, when you say that, you mean like games where you'll put them down, stop playing them, and then come back like a year later, right? Not like when you play through a game multiple times in a row and then never touch it again?
Yeah, the first.
Yeah.
Because I've played this 3 times over the course of the year with breaks in between, like one, I think it was early in the year.
I want to say you played it around like March or April.
Yeah. March, I played it in the summer, and I played it in the fall, and I meant to even play it one more time, but the Christmas break is kicking my ass, so that's a bit of a refresher. But yeah, every time, it's a lot of fun. I like the trophies in this too, because they're all riddles, so they're all like weird things that you'd have to do. Some are being a bit more of a pain in the butt than others. Like, get through this whole level and don't miss any of this, or don't get hit, or don't get damaged or anything like that. But some are just kind of funny in terms of have a 0 score by the end of the whole level, so don't collect anything, which is a lot harder to do than...
Well, it's a game where you're meant to collect things, so it's like, oh god, you have to not do the thing that you're doing normally, right?
Yeah, it's like if you had to play like a 2D Mario game.
Yeah, I was going to say, get through a Mario game without collecting a coin, right? Like,
yeah.
Coins are very deliberately laid out such that you'll just naturally pick them up.
They're nice and shiny, so you're just like, ooh, good, pick that up, and you're like, damn it, I wasn't supposed to do that. Yeah, this is just a great game, and the fact that I'm playing it over and over again over the course of the year and different months is a testament to how good it is.
Yeah, low-key, I feel as though games that are short are just way easier to go back to and replay, because you think about how long it is and go, oh yeah, I can just play through that in an afternoon. So when you want to play it, you just install it again, play it, and you're done. And you're like, alright, that was satisfying. It's kind of like when you think about a piece of food or like a dish that you want to eat, and you're like, oh yeah, I could just make that, and you make it, and you're like, oh, that's delicious.
10 minutes or 2 hours to prep. I don't know. If you want to pick up something that's nice, short, and quick, I'd highly recommend this one. I think it's usually on sale for $10 now, so...
I'm going to say, let's check out what the Steam sales got it for.
Oh, good point. I forget that's on.
40% off. It's $8.69. It's only $15 or no, $14.50 Canadian normally. So
yeah. So there you go. It's a good deal. Just don't refund it because it is short.
He'd be a bastard to fucking refund a game because it was too short.
I
Honest to God.
know that there are people that do that, so...
Yeah, and those people can burn in hell.
Come back to religion now, have we?
Fine. Those people probably have bad things happen to them because of the karmic force of the world.
What a nice political way of saying that.
Oh, instead of saying that they'll get burned down? I'm just sorry, I'm writing down what you listed. It's your stuff for reference later.
Okay.
On a piece of paper.
How old-fashioned.
Yeah, I'm an old man.
So you hate yourself.
I hate everything.
That's
Except for
it.
these games.
Oh.
Next game, HuniePop 2.
Yeah.
I mean, the dream.
The booba.
Yeah, so Thomas and I jokingly, earlier in the year, or even before HuniePop came out, we were saying it was going to be the game of the year 2021.
And here we are.
Well, it's toward the bottom of my cumulative list, but...
It still made the cut.
Yeah, it's still, like, just fucking good. Like, I know that the booba is in there, but it's like one of those things where it's like, if you just got rid of all of the titties and the dating sim stuff, the game would still be good. Because it's just like a really good match 3 game. Which sounds like a weird thing to say, but it's just like, it feels like, in general, the match 3 landscape, or like what people will make in a match 3 as like a match 3 game, are really confined to just copying Bejeweled. And that's it.
Well, yeah, it's all those mobile spin-off versions where it's like, ooh, gardening, but it's this. Or, ooh, it's Harry Potter, but this.
Yeah, and it's just like, they just copy what Bejeweled did. Or, more recently, I guess the template would be to copy what Candy Crush does. And it's just like, there's more that you can do there.
That takes effort.
Yeah, well, it's like I say that because HuniePop and HuniePop 2 do that. HuniePop itself, it made it more involved. You actually had to think about what you were doing and line up combos because you only had a limited number of moves to get through each level. They're like dates, right?
Yeah, the dates.
There's like a layer of strategy to it. And in HuniePop 2, they introduced a thing where it's double dates now. You're swapping back and forth between the two people you're on the date with, and they usually have different preferences as far as which tokens will get you more higher score when you match them against stuff. So you're doing this whole thing where you have to think 5 moves ahead and line up this 5 token combo. When everything finally falls into place, you feel like the fucking smartest person alive. You've been planning this stupid chain out for 4 to 10 turns, and then you finally line everything up, and you get this one combo to go off, and it goes off with this huge combo, and then you end up finishing the level off of that one combo. That's what makes this game so fun. It's just like, you wouldn't think it because of the booba, but it's a thinking man's game. You had to sit down and you had to think about how to line up these crazy ass combos. Otherwise, you won't be able to finish the levels. And it's because of that I really like this game. You're sitting there thinking ahead and actually trying to figure out like, okay, how do I get the board in its current state and make it do that thing?
Yeah, because you're the Chad of puzzles as well as love.
Yeah. Now the game, I will say, pretty weak in the dating sim area. I thought HuniePop itself was fine when it came out, and HuniePop 2 doesn't really do a whole lot to evolve on what HuniePop offered. In the years since then, I've played some more dating sims and have found that there's a lot more space for what you can do and how the writing can be done in that genre. And HuniePop's writing is pretty dog shit. I believe that the developer / writer / whatever the fuck was going for a very self-aware, tongue-in-cheek style of game. Most of the time, I would say that because of that, it hits kind of the mark it's going for and ends up being funny. There are times where I think that some of the jokes don't exactly land that well, and there is some things that the game says that are problematic, but it's one of those things where I'm almost like, but I feel like it's trying to say these things in a way that's like very look at the camera and wink kind of thing, where it's like, it's saying this very problematic thing because it's problematic, specifically to poke fun at the type of people who would seriously think that sort of thing. But I don't know if I want to give the game that much credit, because it feels like that's giving the game way more credit than it deserves. I don't know, with satire, it's sometimes hard to tell when something is, like, oh, you shouldn't be saying that at all. Or it's like, oh, but no, like, this thing is satirical and like, to poke fun at the type of people who carry these beliefs in any type of serious capacity. That's what the joke is actually making fun of. That's a little challenging. That's something that I'm a little bit too stupid to comment on. So if you get kind of irked or bothered by comments that can be somewhat problematic, don't check out HuniePop, because that is definitely a weak spot that the game has, and the dating sim elements are obviously they're pretty shallow, I think. But if you just want to play the most Chadly of match 3 games and don't care about booba, That's HuniePop 2. It is the most Chadley match 3 game. It is so fucking good.
It kind of sounds like you want the writing from Boyfriend Dungeon, but then the match 3 from here, and then just smush them together.
That's kind of what I'm like getting at, right? Like, it's like if you had the good part of Boyfriend Dungeon and the good part of HuniePop, and you took those and you smashed them together, you'd have like a game I could 100% recommend to other people. Instead of it being like, well, Boyfriend Dungeon is kind of shit in the gameplay regard, but has some pretty good writing, and HuniePop is pretty shit in the writing department, and also has some maybe problematic jokes, but it's really good in the gameplay department. And obviously, with me, gameplay holds way the fuck more weight than story does. So that's why HuniePop is a game that I think is really good, and it's on my short list for best games of the year, where, you know, Boyfriend Dungeon is not even remotely close.
All right. Now, what pray tell have you put in this chat? There's just a cat that's shaved. That's terrifying.
I was on Twitter and I found a half-shaved cat. So it's like a long hair cat, and its head and his neck have been shaved.
Right to the skin. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, so it's the cat, like the actual animal, is maybe 1/3 the size of the rest of it, because it's like it's a long-haired cat, so its fur is it's gotta be like 2-3 inches long, so it's just it looks so weird. You're like a regular ass size cat, and it's because it's just tiny neck and a little head on the end of it. Even though that's just like a normal sized cat. This is funny as hell looking.
That poor creature looks like an alien.
Yeah, I'm gonna shave Chives, make her look like a fucking alien.
Anyway, CrossCode.
Yay! Oh fuck! I just blew up the recording from my side. Oh no!
That happy, huh?
It's like the bar hit the top, and it's the inner bar hit the top, not the outer bar. I just blew my fucking sound. Oh man, sorry everyone. CrossCode.
Yes, the only MMO I'll ever play.
Is that true? Have you never played another MMO? Like any MMO?
I have, but like I don't think I've even played an MMO in my 20s.
Okay.
At least not actively. Like, I might have given it a small try, but the only ones I think I've ever tried were the Elder Scrolls Online briefly, and then
yes, the Elder Scrotums, my favorite game series.
Final Fantasy 14. I think that would have been back when it was on the PS3. That's how old.
Oh, so you played the fucking the worst part of that game.
Yes.
I've only played the worst part of that game too, and I'm like, man, I already spent 100 hours in this game, and it was complete dog shit. I'm not gonna spend another 100 at the there is a reason why I played through the entirety of A Realm Reborn, but like people were like, oh, don't you want to keep playing? And I'm like, no, this game is awful.
Yeah, so this MMO single player game.
Yeah.
No, I really like the overall design of this game. It makes a lot of sense, this MMO world. So you get to meet like players that like log in and out, and you as the protagonist for X reason aren't able to. So you have this sort of weird relationship with these people.
So it's an action RPG, but it's set in an MMO world.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how the story is framed. Although I would say it's structurally like a very typical JRPG. You've got like the amnesiac protagonist.
Yeah, except she can't even talk, so...
Yeah, and I feel like, well, I want to completely hijack this, but I feel like that Leah has like more emotion and character than like 90% of video game characters, and it all comes from the way that they've animated her facial expressions. So even though she can only say 14 words by the end of the game, you still have a really good idea of how she feels and thinks about things based on her facial expressions.
Mm-hmm. I was trying to remember her name because I'm bad with names.
Oh, yes, it's Leah.
Now I finally got the Steam page open, and the first review is recommended. Hi, Leah. Thanks, Leah. Hi, Leah. Hi. Bye.
Yep. If you played the game, that'll make perfect sense.
Yep. Guy has 110 hours on record. Yep. He liked that game. Or she.
But they've played through the game potentially twice there.
At least. I love the puzzle solving. The dungeons are great. I think that's the point where you'll decide whether or not you really, really like this game or not. Some of the earlier quests are okay in the environments, but once you get to the dungeon, that's where...
Yeah, that's where the game really starts to come alive.
Yeah.
You just go through these Zelda-style puzzle dungeons.
Yeah, no, Leah is a great protagonist, even though she can't say anything, because she emotes so well in this game to the point where you're like, does she even need to talk? I know how she's feeling. I know how she's handling the situation.
Yeah, that's like one of I think the critical differences between Leah versus insert silent protagonist here. Think about it, like,
yes.
My biggest criticism of Link in like almost every Legend of Zelda game is that he has a stone face the entire time. He maybe shows anger and shock once or twice, but that's it.
The princess has been kidnapped.
Angry Link. Or Shocked Link. Angry Link. Yeah, where Wind Waker is one of the only, for me, I think it's one of the only Zelda games that I really, really like, and part of that comes from the fact that Link actually has expressions in that game.
That is very true. Yeah, you definitely see that when you're doing like the auctions, when like someone does it in crazy bid and you're just like, like, why would you do that?
I like when Link gets outbid in the auction and then he gives the person who outbid him the stank eye. He's looking at them like,
he gives the stink eye to a lot of people in that game.
Yeah, he does.
He hates the people in that world.
He's an angry little prick.
I mean, he came from this like quiet little remote island, and then his sister's kidnapped, and then...
Such a little bastard. But yeah, I don't know. I my whole like sales pitch for CrossCode, I don't know if you'd agree with it, is fundamentally it's like, if do you like JRPGs? Do you like Legend of Zelda? Yes. Then try this game up to the first dungeon, and if you bounce off of it, then
that's it. Yeah,
whatever.
That's fine.
But the first bit of the game maybe doesn't do the greatest. Like it's pretty simplistic in its combat and the quests. So for me, I was like, ooh, this is kind of like an MMO. That's neat. They're really selling like the MMO world thing. But it's like
some of the stuff where it's like, oh, this door just leads into the ocean because it's not been programmed.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
There's like some things in there where you're like, oh, but like these quests are dog shit in MMOs, and this game is just like, oh yeah, we have the same dog shit MMO quests, and it's like,
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think the story's pretty good. It takes a bit to get really going, but until that point, I think you got a few really good characters to help keep things going. For me, it actually also reminded me a lot of people who I used to play MMOs with in kind of broad strokes.
Yeah, and obviously I did not have that same type of experience. So for me, I had a completely different one.
Yeah. Did you still like the characters, though?
Yeah, no, I still liked the characters. Thought they were well varied. Some obviously got a bit more time to shine than others, but...
Yeah, is Amelia her name? Or Emily, or something like that?
I believe it's Amelia.
For me, she was a standout. She reminded me of one of my old guildmates from MapleStory. Like, a lot. Because we were very, like, friendly competition all the time. She reminded me of her a lot, but just in her own right, I feel like she's got probably one of the better character story arcs in the entire game. It's
crazy to realize that you were actually being somewhat timed in those dungeons. So like, some of the dungeons I got through quickly, but then I got through some of them really slow. So they're like, haha, you were slow, and I'm just like, I wonder if that's just the story or if I was just actually slow. And turns out it is the case.
No, you actually are competing with Amelia through every single dungeon.
Yeah, it's just there's no timer, so you just don't know that. But then afterwards, you kind of know it.
Yeah, she'll make fun of you if she wins. In a friendly rivalry type way. Yeah, CrossCode's a good-ass game. I'm glad that you also enjoyed it. I assume that I recommended it at some point. Is that why you played it?
Yes.
Okay, so that's two people who I got to play. See, there you go. You heard it from Jason. Jason liked the game. Ian from Adventure Rules liked the game. My buddy Keith, who listens to the podcast occasionally, I recommended it to him. He picked it up and played it last year. He thought it was a good-ass game. I don't remember if it made his top 5 for last year. It might have been on, like, the honorable mentions list, but, like, everyone who I've told to play this game has enjoyed this game. If you like JRPGs and Zelda Dungeons, play this fucking game. Except for Nico, but Nico's a fucking piece of shit, so it doesn't matter. He's just like, it's like, okay. And I'm like, Nico, get the fuck out of here. You like Dragon Quest XI. Get the fuck out of here.
I didn't mind Dragon Quest XI.
No, but he's like, this is the best PS4 game I have ever played. And I'm like, good lord. I
don't agree with that statement.
You would say that the game that feels like a fucking Super Nintendo game is the best PS4 game. I might be erroneously quoting him on that. He can come back and tell me I've misquoted him on that. But I feel like that's something that he said at one point.
Mm-hmm.
And Maz completely lost his mind when he said it, but anyway.
I can imagine.
Is that it for CrossCode?
Yeah, more or less.
I feel like I got to contribute about as much as you did to that one.
I knew that was happening.
Yeah, well, I've actually played that one, so really liked it.
Alright, it's Strive time, I assume.
Guilty Gear Strive, baby! I'm sure that that's not a surprise for anyone listening to the podcast. It's my game of the year, like full on
Period.
Game of the year. Yeah. Obviously, I said before that I prioritize gameplay over basically everything else when it comes to games.
So fighting games are king.
Yeah, fighting games are like an easy win for me. Guilty Gear Strive is a phenomenal game. There are a few things that I wish were better about it, but like I have put 160 hours into this game so far this year. Every time I sit down to play it, I'm like, oh, I'm just gonna play like a little bit, and then I end up playing it for like 2 or 3 hours.
Is that as much time as you spent in
Thinking of Fantasy Strike?
Fantasy Strike, yes.
No, I played Fantasy Strike on and off for 2.5 years, so it is almost 500 hours of playtime. Guilty Gear I've been playing since, what was it? Evo, so August of this year, so 5 or 6 months, and it's 160 hours. It's the 8th most played game I have on Steam, if you don't include the art program that I use, which is also in my Steam library. So yeah, it's the game I spent the most time with this year. I tend to prioritize games that I get really heavily invested in from a gameplay perspective, and games that I will come back to and enjoy again and again and again and again, really highly over games that I don't have that relationship with. So Guilty Gear Strive, for me, takes the cake. Really love the music. I love the aesthetic. I love the way the characters look in this game. It's so, like, a lot of them are so, like, butt rock. For me, like, I grew up playing Sonic the Hedgehog games, so like that type of music is something that I really like listening to, even though it's just like power chords and kind of loud and noisy. But that's just because it's like something that was a very big part of my formative years. So the fact that this game is like just fucking like butt rock the game is so up my alley.
Mm-hmm.
There's some complexity to Guilty Gear as far as like what moves can actually be canceled and how you can cancel them, which is something that's completely new to me as far as like fighting games go. As like a lot of the other stuff I've tried doesn't necessarily have as much canceling in it as this does. So that's just when you stop doing a move like partway through it and go into like another move. There are reasons why you would or would not want to do that in specific scenarios, but
well, some of it's acting like feints and stuff like that.
yeah,
right?
It's just like to mess with your opponent basically.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's like a lot of crazy shit you can do in this game. I feel like they added some more crazy shit with the 1.05 patch, which added more dash and jump cancels as well as more Gatling options.
The air-related combat, yeah?
Yeah, specifically to the air-related stuff. Generally, that was probably pretty lacking. The game felt really ground-based when I played it at first, and it's a lot more sluggish than I expected it to, but I feel like it's in a better place now. Movement-wise, it's still a little bit stiffer than I thought it was going to be, based on the fact that it is an anime fighting game, but mechanically very satisfying, and it's satisfying as hell to play. The different characters on offer have a variety of different styles, and just in general, the game heavily incentivizes interacting, so defensive play is discouraged, or like just, like constantly running away is very discouraged with the way that the systems in the game are designed. You'll get meter for doing supers and Roman cancels by attacking and by moving towards your opponent, so by being aggressive, you get rewarded, and by being defensive, you don't get rewarded. So with a game having systems like that built in, you're going to incentivize players to interact with one another, which makes the game a lot more fun, I think, instead of a game where, you're playing a really neutral, heavy game. But there is still, like, neutral in this, so it's got rollback netcode. That's always a huge plus. It's fucking mandatory. Without rollback netcode, this game would be completely unplayable to me, specifically because of the way that the regions are designed in this game. And
have you switched to the European?
I haven't tried it.
Yet,
I haven't tried it yet. But that's like my one big sticking point with this game is the lobbies in this game suck ass. The lobbies in this game are so fucking bad.
They're the arcade. Two people have to sit down at the arcade or table or whatever.
Yeah, you gotta he'll try to connect to the fucking arcade tables, and then it won't work. It'll constantly give you these vague error messages, and then you'll get into it. You'll queue up with somebody, and you won't be able to see what your connection strength is to that person until you're in the match. And there's a ton of times where it's okay, so it's a huge pain in the ass to even get in the match sometimes. And then you get into a match, and it's 200 millisecond ping, 7 rollback frames. You're like, what the fuck? So then neither player wants to play this, so you get that match over with as quickly as possible, and then both of you leave, and then you go back into the lobby and just deal with the bullshit from the lobby again. When you're actually in the matches playing people, it's great, but holy fuck are the lobbies so bad. I hate the lobby system in this game. It's so amateur hour. I can't believe that a fucking AAA game price was attached to this game specifically because of how bad the lobbies are. It's embarrassingly bad. Now, having shit on the lobbies that heavily, and I haven't brought the lobbies up at all before because they just pissed me off so much.
No, you haven't.
It should speak volumes that I can still look past how dog shit the lobbies are in this game and say like the other aspects of this game make it still like extremely fun to play. This is it. Once you actually
the
get
core is still good.
Yeah, it's like once you actually get into the match and you're playing a game against somebody else, it's just so fucking fun. It's just like getting into a match and dealing with the lobbies is just a complete pain in the balls. It's like that's like that one thing that I'd be like, this needs to be fixed. I don't know if it will be fixed, but I swear, like it's gonna sound racist because it is, but I don't know what the fuck Japanese people are doing. Like it feels to me like they've never played online games except for what was made by other Japanese developers, because all the lobbies in Japanese games just suck ass. They're so bad. Just look at any other game. Because some people would be like, oh, but like fighting game lobbies are always bad. And to that I would say, I played Them's Fightin' Herds earlier this year, and it does exactly the same thing, but it does it properly. It is exactly what this game's lobby is trying to be, but it works instead of being dog shit. So yeah, like just get rid of the little stations, make it so you can connect to the person directly instead of having to connect to these dumbass stations. Fucking show ping before the match starts so that if there's like a really high ping, both players can go, no, I don't want any of that. And they can just not have to deal with it. And then if you still want to have those little stations, you can have like a few of them and then do it like kind of like what Herds does, where you have like a queue of people lined up and the winner stays on. You keep having them rotate in and out. And then people who are not in the match can watch the matches, because that's like, to me, a more authentically arcade experience than standing at a station, seeing an error message 5 times in a row before you finally connect to it and then get shunted into a match with somebody who you have a terrible connection to.
Game of the year.
Yeah, well, it's like the weird thing to me is that like whenever I play an unranked, I never run into this. It's only when I play ranked. I only have connection problem, but it's like the time, like when I go into unranked, I'll be in unranked for like 3 hours and I'll play 3 people. So I'll play someone for an hour and then I'll go to someone else and play them for an hour and I'll go to someone else and play them for an hour. It's not necessarily a fair comparison, because in ranked it's like, oh, like an hour of play I'll fight like 35 different people.
Right.
So it's like, oh yeah, when you fight like 35 different people, it's like, yeah, you got a much higher probability of running into somebody who has a dog shit connection, and it, that'll happen like maybe 2, 3, 4 times. Versus when you're in unranked, it's like, oh yeah, you get like, if you run into someone where it's a bad connection, you're like, fuck it, and you just go and try and find somebody else. And like in general, I've never run into anyone with bad connection in unranked, but it's like I've only ever played like, I don't know, 12 people in unranked, because I just go in and play extraordinarily long sets with people in unranked. But that's, for me, that's like the best way to enjoy the game, is to just go in and just play someone for like an hour straight, and you're just like constantly making adjustments and learning. You might have like a runaway win streak for a bit, and then they'll like make adjustments, and then they'll start fucking with you, and then they'll start winning a bunch, and then you have to make adjustments to fight back against whatever they're doing. That's like peak fighting game. It's so compelling. Just in general, I think Guilty Gear does a great job or Guilty Gear Strive specifically, does a great job of providing really compelling fighting game mechanics and a variety of different characters that make use of those mechanics in varying degrees, so that you can find a character who very specifically meshes with your personal preferences, and then just spend exorbitant amounts of time slowly peeling away layers of that onion until you find like just, that's, for me, that's like the best part of fighting games, right? It's just being able to play them indefinitely and just constantly finding new things to learn and get better at and improve, and seeing that those tangible improvements every single time I play. So, game of the year, despite the lobbies being just atrocious. With that, what's your number 4 there, Jason?
4th one, in obviously no particular order, BioShock Remastered.
Oh, the original.
Yeah.
Sorry, I gotta preface this with a question. Does it actually work on the consoles? Because on PC, it's a complete shit show.
It works perfectly fine on the consoles.
Okay. I'm surprised with how much of these I agree, because the BioShock's one of my fucking favorite ass games. So yeah, let's get into BioShock Remastered.
Yeah, I mean, when I booted this up for the first time, because I tried BioShock, I don't know, maybe let's say 2013, 2012 or so. Wasn't really gelling with it. Now I played it. I finished the whole thing in about 3 days, so...
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's not too long either.
No, not too long. The powers are very interesting and what you can do with them, and obviously, as you've mentioned before, it's the systems that are in there that are very compelling. Like, oh, I can lead these people over to this machine or the camera that I've hijacked, and now it triggers for those enemies, and it'll deal with the enemies for me instead of me having to use up ammo.
Yeah, I feel like that was the big revelation that I had while playing the game originally, because I was trying to play it like a first, like Call of Duty, at first. And I'm like, damn, I keep getting my ass kicked by everything.
I have a feeling that's why I played it like back in 2013, 2012.
Yeah, but then
when
when
I
you
just
start
didn't realize.
when you start messing around with the actual like systemic mechanics in the game, suddenly it goes from being this completely oppressive first-person shooter to being this game where you're kind of fucking around with stuff and paying attention to details in the environment, specifically to look for opportunities to fuck over everything. It's like, oh, this enemy's standing in a room full of water. Let's shoot a lightning round into the water and then watch all of the enemies light up like Christmas trees.
And I mean, the game somewhat explains its systems, but a lot of it is to do with player interacting with the environments in general, I think. Learning it through trial and error and then seeing what works so that you can proceed through the other levels, and just it kind of almost gets easier by the end than the beginning.
Yeah. So I would say that that's a fair assessment, yeah.
Not just only because you're learning more about the game, but just the game gives you almost almost too much power in the end.
Yeah.
over the course, so it's not the most balanced per se. Like the daddies will give you issues in like level 1 and 2, and but by the point of like main level 3 and 4, you're just kicking their asses. Like there's no issue with doing that, at least on normal. Maybe when you crank it up to the higher difficulty, it become a bit more oppressive, but I didn't find it.
If I remember correctly, the biggest difference between normal and hard is that on hard, there's actually a penalty for dying. So on normal, when you die, nothing happens. You just get sent back to like the last spawn. In hard, you lose money every single time you die, which means that you're going to become weaker and weaker and weaker every single time you die. Since there's only a limited amount of money in the game, and you need it for upgrades and resources.
Yes.
Which then forces you to make more interesting decisions about like, okay, I have to hack this fucking vending machine, otherwise I cannot afford anything.
Yeah, the hacking in general is quite a bit of fun. It's a bit saddening in the second
game
how they
you actually like the hacking?
It's not too bad.
I don't know. I wasn't a huge fan of it, but I guess there's worse hacking minigames.
I like how it can be tense when it's like, oh god, I gotta figure out the path for this to get from X to Y.
I suppose.
Though, to be fair, some of those were an immediate reset afterwards because they were impossible to win, in my opinion. There are a few times where it seems like it's just not humanly possible to get through it.
Yeah, I don't think I ever ran into issues like with that.
Were you hacking like everything?
Oh god, no, I didn't.
I hacked everything.
No.
So in the later parts of the levels, they were bad. So
no, I think by the time I hit the later parts of the levels, I was mostly relying on the upgraded weapons and the powers you get. I was relying on those most of the time. What did you think of the story elements? Because that's a big part of why I hold BioShock in such high regard. It's not just like the gameplay that does really well, it's also got like a story that isn't completely at odds with what's happening gameplay-wise. And / spoilers for fucking BioShock and BioShock Remastered for the 4 people who have never played those games.
I mean, to be fair, I was one of them.
Yeah.
The 5th one. Yeah, it was fine. I mean, obviously I knew what the plot twist was coming because that shit is everywhere on the internet, so...
Yeah, that's why I don't necessarily feel that bad about talking about it. I didn't actually know... I didn't know anything about BioShock before I played it. I just knew that people liked it. So, like, when I got to the fucking plot twist part, I was like, oh my god!
I mean, based off of a lot of media that I've played, I know when a betrayal's coming.
Yeah, that's fair.
It's really easy to sniff it out, so...
I feel like that's where the game should have ended. And it feels like that's where the game should have ended. It's kind of actually almost like Resident Evil 7, where there's like this whole like last 2 or 3 hour jamboree you have to go through with
the last boss fight that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, with a terrible last boss fight. That feels very like it's happening after the big climax has already happened, and you're like, "What? Why is this even here?"
It might have been more interesting if, like, the little sisters that you'd saved along that piece of the journey either helped you out killing the evil villain or sided with him if you kind of devoured them.
Doesn't they be dead?
Well, you didn't devour. Like, you didn't get through all the little sisters at that point. Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. It feels really weird to me when you have a story that's fundamentally about like how people don't question anything that they're told to do in video games. That's the story, right? It's like, oh yeah, I've told you to do all these things the entire time, and you just did them without questioning them. It's like, oh shit, he's right, I did. I don't know. I think it would have been like that. It would have been just a very powerful ending to just end it right there instead of having the whole fucking thing where Tannenbaum helps you redeem yourself and whatever. And I'm like, oh, what the fuck? Why is this even here? I mean, it does result in like a nice feel good ending at the end, provided you didn't take the evil route, because this is back when every game had to have a fucking morality, like a black and white morality system.
Which is honestly the funniest thing, because even the achievements for the game don't want you to go for that like evil path. There's only one for saving all the sisters. It's not like one for killing them all.
Yeah, because there's no mechanical benefit to killing them. That's like another big problem with it. Killing them gives you more Adam early on, but if you save them, Tannenbaum gives you extra rewards, and the extra rewards accumulate quickly over time to be way more than if you killed them.
Well, it's the money, it's the Adam, it's the tonics, it's everything. Everything is a net positive if you just save them.
You suffer for a very small amount of time, but the bonuses you get for saving them very quickly outweigh what you would get from killing them. I think video game morality systems in general are usually pretty shit, but I think BioShock's in particular is very, very, very abysmal.
Yeah, I mean, you just get a small difference in the game, like the ending. It's not like
I don't even know what the bad ending
third act. They kind of just stab you, I think.
Oh, okay.
That's about it. They don't get to see the sunlight.
Yeah, that's the only one I've seen is the one where they see the sunlight, and the final shot is like your deathbed, and then you have like a bunch of women's hands on your chest because they're like, oh, our father or whatever, because you were like their adopted dad for the rest of their life.
I mean, BioShock 2 does a bit better of a job with the morality system. Like,
I mean, they couldn't do much worse. Let's be real
on
here.
The ending, but it's still like you should just get the good ending. That's about it. Feel good. Everything's better. Little sisters are all saved and can live their lives, not under the sea.
I think the other thing that the BioShock in particular does pretty well is that it's very good at masking that it's a political game, because most motherfuckers who have played that game don't seem to understand that it's a political game, which baffles me. But like, until I had heard about
objectivism.
Objectivism, thank you. It's based on objectivism, and it's like, what would a society that totally ran with this idea of objectivism look like? And
this is it.
Yeah, it starts off very prosperous, but eventually it just completely fucks itself over. But you can play the entire game, not know any of that, and still just enjoy the game on a mechanical and story level, but it has this whole extra thing where if you know about that sort of stuff, then you can examine the game from that lens, and there's a whole extra avenue to look at it.
I mean, I really like BioShock Infinite's 2 DLC levels.
Yes.
Being able to show that part of Rapture off before it was a shithole. I like that.
That I think also adds some interesting extra context, but BioShock on its own I think still pretty well works. And I guess the remastered version, sans maybe the PC port, unless they fix that shit show up, would be the best way to play it at least on a modern console anyway.
I think you can even play this on the Switch now. They have BioShock, the whole collection on the Switch.
Good God.
Non-cloud versions.
Oh my God, really?
I'm pretty damn sure.
Holy fuck. Yeah, this has been a good year. I actually know some of the games you have played and can actually contribute to the conversation.
And I cannot say the same about yours.
To be completely fair, most people, whenever I talk about games, tend to say things like that. I mean, at least in the fighting game circle, most people would have played Guilty Gear Strive at some point this year, and some people may or may not agree with me on how good or bad that game is. I know I've honestly had a lot of fun playing it, but maybe not the same for other folks. But when you get into some of the weirder indie stuff I play, that's typically where I lose a lot of people. Though HuniePop too, I know at least Thomas has played that, so he and I wrote an article about it, so people are already kind of familiar with it. It Takes Two is a pretty big game. Actually, this is crazy for me that I got 2 AAA games on the list this year, and I think it's 3 with the full list. So that's something to look forward to. I think I had a pretty good year as far as what games I've actually played, but my final game, the final 2021 game I wanted to bring up, and I'm sure that you can guess what it is, and so can everyone else, because by process of elimination, I haven't talked about it yet.
It's that one that you wrote an article for recently after months and months of not being able to write an article about it.
Yes, thank you, Grammar Sensei, for help with that article. So yeah, Wildermyth. It's a fantastic game. So, like, here's the thing. Where Guilty Gear Strive is definitely the game I've had the most fun with this year. Wildermyth is, like, my indie innovation pick, because I always play, like, weird, or kind of weird indie games, or I try to play weird indie games instead of trying new things or things that I haven't seen before. They're trying different spins on things that maybe have already been done to see if they can do them better. Wildermyth is my pick for, like, weird, innovative indie game that was awesome. It is, in my opinion, one of the best RPGs that's ever been created, and it does what so many video game RPGs have failed to do, which is to say that it accurately translates the experience of tabletop role-playing games into the video game space. I generally speaking feel like video game RPGs have largely become their own fucking thing. They started off as a translation of the tabletop RPGs. And you got to see two very distinct versions of that. The Western side of RPG development started off emulating that pretty heavily in as far as the world building and the character building side of things.
Like kind of like The Witcher, you'd say?
I was thinking like way the fuck back, like fucking old Elder Scrolls games.
Oh, yeah.
The original Baldur's Gate. There's a few older games that way the fuck predate me, and I cannot remember their names right now. Neverwinter Nights, like stuff like that. Like people would know, like these are like really famous Western RPGs that started off on the computers and they were super duper involved and really complex. And I feel like they were pretty good at capturing tabletop RPGs, but they didn't necessarily have the communal aspect of them. And I'll get into that in a second. And then JRPGs were like, how do we simplify tabletop stuff? Because obviously this is too complicated for people who have never experienced a role-playing game before, and that's how like Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy were born.
They kidified them?
Yeah, well, there's an argument to be made for introducing a completely new audience to a concept that is totally foreign to them, and I'd say that they did it in a really good job. It's just that they spun it off into this thing that was kind of really far removed from what an RPG, like, it wasn't, I guess in its original state, super far removed, but over time it slowly morphed more and more and more far away from what I feel like makes RPGs, and instead you have these kind of like really grindy games that tell a story, and I don't know, to me it feels more like they took like the combat from tabletop RPGs and they made like more than half of the game that, and then they tell anime stories with it. The anime stories I don't hate. Sometimes I do, but sometimes I don't, because I do watch anime. The video games always feel like they include like the worst parts of shonen anime. You know how like training arcs happen off screen, and you don't typically have to watch like 4 seasons of a character just doing the same thing every single day to get better at fighting?
Yeah, or it's just a couple episodes at most. I learned my new skill, and now I'm going to use it against this arc.
Yeah, or like they have time skips and stuff. One Piece is a good example of that, where they just fuck off for 7 years and get better, and you kind of like see the characters for like a little bit in that time to see like what they're kind of doing. Yeah, I feel like most JRPGs are like, oh yeah, we get to spend most of our time just in the most boring part of an anime, watching the characters train. Ugh. But yeah, so like in both of those instances, the game is very authoritative. The game is dictating its story to you. I feel like in Western RPGs, you have a lot more say over what your character can do. And I find that generally, if you're given a lot of player expression and you can do like a lot of things, that typically comes at the detriment of your character being this kind of like general hero person who doesn't really have a lot of character or backstory because you're expected to kind of fill that in. Wildermyth, for me, hits the perfect balance of having like characters that are characters and storytelling beats that feel like where the game plays off of you in the same way that like a DM can play off of you. So you have characters that get generated. You can customize them a little bit within reason, but so you'll have these characters that are actually characters with defined traits, backstories, attitudes, preferences, dislikes, and then as you go through your campaign, they will play off of each other, and as you make decisions, then the game is going to make decisions based on the decisions that you've made to organically tell a story that would not be possible if it was written very explicitly by the developers beforehand. It's very collaborative. It's very communal. It involves the player and the story writer, in this case the story writer is the game, to create a unique story that wouldn't exist any other way. And for me, that's the heart of what makes tabletop games so enjoyable. It's not just epic Chad Hero Man Skyrim guy goes and Fusrodas the fucking dragons off of the mountains and then saves the realm or whatever. It's a company of heroes go off and save the world and here's all the crazy shit that happened along the way, where certain heroes had different kind of mini arcs that helped define certain things about them. Like this character ended up losing her eye at some point because of this, but oh hey, it ended up being something that affected her later on. And this other character had this really great rivalry with this other character who they'd known for years now, and over time it went from being like kind of an antagonistic relationship to being a friendly rivalry where they challenged each other in combat all the time to outdo one another, and they ended up being two of the party's strongest offensive members because of that. So yeah, there's like a ton of emergent storytelling that happens because of how the game plays off of what you do. And the other thing that's kind of cool is that the game always leaves just enough to the player's imagination, and as long as the player is willing to run with that, they can make the story like just a little bit more elaborate than what the game is capable of doing, and that makes things a lot more memorable. So in the article I wrote, you can read it, it's called "The Best Stories in Wildermyth were written by you," or I think, or something like that, or written by the player. But one of my favorite characters, one of the most memorable characters to me, was Maya. And with my time having Maya in my party, I accidentally led her to take her own eye out when she tried to dislodge a gemstone from an altar. And then so that ended up like partly blinding her, right? But then later on, she had an event where she's talking about her eye in the third person, and it led her to like a giant eagle's nest. And I'm like, oh, so like I didn't actually blind her. That stone is like magically infused or whatever, so she can still see out of that eye. And then over time, parts of her body also became stone. So like her one leg became stone, which increased the amount of armor she had, and her one arm became stone as well, which made her go from being like a backline mage who just cast spells to being like a frontline battle mage who just beat the shit out of people with her stone arm. But like that event where they went to the eagle's nest, I got that again on another playthrough, and the character who was in that was talking about their eye in the third person as well. And I'm like, oh, that specific dialogue only came up because of like traits that Maya and this other character had in common. So maybe she was blind from the stone. I don't know, but in my version of the story, right, that gem that infused into her skull was like some magically infused stone which turned parts of her body into stone, but also like she was able to use it as an actual eye, so she wasn't actually crippled. So she didn't actually just have like one eye. That's what I mean by like, if you're willing to like have a bit of imagination, you can elaborate on the story and kind of spin it your own way. There's nothing that happened in the story or the writing that contradicted my own interpretation of it, which I think was really great, because it leads to a bunch of fantastic organic storytelling. There's like another example I remember seeing on the Steam page. Somebody had a troop, and like a married couple ended up dying in a battle together. And then
that's so tragic.
They still won, and then they moved ahead in their campaign, and then 10 years in the future, the next part of the campaign started, and they had 2 new party members. And they were like, oh, I guess the game just threw me a bone to help replace the 2 party members. And he looked at the name, or the person looked at the names of those characters and saw that it was the children of the 2 people who died in battle. So like the kids came in to fill the spots to avenge their parents, and in that person's version of their story, they'd said that like over that 10-year gap, the person who remained alive from the party took over parenting these 2 kids and became like their foster parent, right? There's nothing in the game that necessarily said that that's what happened, but that's how this person interpreted it. That's what I mean by it's like you put a little bit into the game and you can get a lot out of it that way. I genuinely think if you like tabletop role-playing experiences, fucking play this game. It's fantastic. It's only on PC right now. There is a Switch port coming at some point next year. If you cannot be asked to play things on PC, or you don't have like a laptop that can run this game, fucking pick it up when it comes out on Switch. Genuinely fantastic game. Very interestingly designed, very smartly designed, and just a fucking great-ass RPG. It'll be one of the most interesting storytelling games you will ever play. Guarantee it.
And how long would you say is a playthrough, like a run?
That depends. You can play 3-act and 5-act campaigns. So the big problem is that I read slow, and this is a lot of reading. So I think that the 3-act campaigns for a person who reads at a normal speed would be about 5 hours. I read really slow, so for me they were about 10 hours. And then the 5-act campaigns, I would say, are probably closer to about, I want to say 7 to 9 hours, and for me they took about 15. I read glacially slow.
It's alright, you're absorbing everything.
No, I just read slow. I don't know how to read fast.
I tried to throw you a bone, but alright.
No, I genuinely read slow as fucking tortoise. It's really weird because it's like people would look at like I play like really actiony type games. People would be like, "Oh man, you should be able to do things like really quickly." And I'm like, "No, actually, I have very slow reflexes. That translates into how slowly I read things. I have genuinely no idea how I play action games. Well, that's not true. I know how I play action games. It's just it's not something that's as easy to explain. It's all through anticipation."
Predictive analysis.
Anyway, just as like a final cap off, Wildermyth is genuinely one of the most interesting indie games that I've played this year. I highly recommend checking it out. Conceptually, it's very interesting, and if you like anything that I've just described, then I think you'll probably enjoy the game. With that, Jason, what is game number 5?
My last one is Ys VIII Lacrimosa of Donna.
Yeast? Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
This was honestly, other than CrossCode, one of my favorite RPGs that I played this year. Hands down. Like, this was also another game. It's followed suit with BioShock Remastered, where I finished most of this in under a week. So, obviously, I've talked about this before. The cast of characters is great. Donna is great. Throughout your adventure, the island is this perfect hub where you can just explore at your own pace, slowly unlocking some new abilities that are going to help further explore the island. It's very rewarding getting all the chests along the areas, like finishing 100% of a map. You periodically get them some rewards from one of the people in your camp that for every like 10% of the map that you complete for the whole island. The fact that you don't obviously have a map of this place, you have to figure it out as you go because no one's ever been there.
It's an uncharted island.
Yeah, so it makes a lot of sense. Just a lot of the design choices in the game made sense. The fact that bartering is not for money, bartering is for other goods, for those services. Once you get the medic, essentially, of the team, then you can craft the potions and whatnot, and over time you find these recipe books that are from these treasures on this island, some of which are from past people who have been trapped on the island because there is no escape due to the kraken-like creature that prevents anyone from really leaving the island. Yeah, it's just a phenomenal game. Has a damn good soundtrack. I've recently been playing the Trails of Cold Steel from The Legend of Heroes, and that also is from the same developer, and the soundtrack in that is phenomenal as well. So the company that makes these games always makes good RPGs, in my opinion, and music to back that up that always adds well to the events that are happening.
Yeah, I was gonna say, while I give Japanese developers a lot of shit because of their just fucking inability to pull their heads out of their own asses and look at what the rest of the industry is doing, they do make good music in their games, generally speaking.
It's the one thing you're going to give them credit for.
Yeah, that's it. That's the only thing Japanese developers get a credit for. They would consistently have really good music in games that always feels thematically and emotionally appropriate for whenever and wherever the music is playing.
Yeah, no, I really like this RPG. Usually I get burnt out by maybe the 30 or 40 hour mark, but this was one of the ones where I continued on. And that's, to be fair, for the Persona games, I usually get to the 80-hour mark, and I'm like, yeah, no, this was too long, sorry.
Those games are so fucking long.
They are so long. That's the only reason I never finished them. I get to that point, and I'm just like, I am burnt out. Jesus Christ, why is this?
You don't need to make games that are that long, man. Like, come on. Some of our fucking regular listeners are going to be like, don't you take away my 150-hour Personas, you pieces of shit.
You can trim those down quite a bit.
Yeah.
This is probably closer to the maybe 50 to 60 hour mark, which is still a lot.
That's a long-ass time. Holy fuck.
I'm just going to look up how long to beat. Maybe I just took my sweet-ass time because I was just exploring the island.
So, I don't know. Generally speaking, whenever I look at how long to beat, I always come in like several hours over whatever the estimates are from that. I feel like the people who post most of their times in that are just like speedrunning through the games as quickly as possible.
40 to 50 hours is the
yeah, you see what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, and I mean, the boss designs are all great because this is an action RPG.
Yeah.
They're all very well designed. And they get better over time. I don't know. I kind of feel like the final boss was a tiny bit of a pushover, but there was almost kind of like, which kind of always happens. But
yeah, I was gonna say you
enough...
might have just been over leveled.
Maybe, but there was almost kind of a gauntlet of bosses near the end, which I thought kind of made sense because they were essentially protecting the final boss.
Yeah, they needed protection.
Killed off. Yes, you, the protagonist. And each character is varied in their approach and how you're going to play as them. So it's not like, oh, this is interchangeable RPG
character number 5
I'll never use. Like, I was swapping to different party members constantly, so changed out my playstyle. Like, there are obviously a few that are stronger for the fights that you're in, and you get a tiny bit of attack bonus if you have 2 of the same type, slice, pierce, and then like kind of like a blast one, and there's 2 characters for each, and if you put 2 of them together on the same team, because you only can have 3 at any given time, then they get a small bonus, but for the most part you're always just going to have 1 of each type just so that you can handle what's being thrown at you.
I guess side question is kind of related but kind of unrelated. I know that Tales of Arise has more action-y type combat. Are you going to play that next year, do you think? Or
I don't know yet.
Okay.
I think I've played almost all of the Tales games that have come out, but...
Obviously you don't hate them then.
No, I don't hate them. I will probably pick it up eventually.
Is that it for...
I think so.
Lacrimosa of...
Lacrimosa.
Lacrimosa of Dana. Okay, so I have to ask, because like, obviously you know Guilty Gear Strive is like my game of the year, and Wildermyth is kind of like a very close runner-up. But did you actually choose a game of the year out of that list? Don't tell me. I want to guess it if you did.
I did.
Okay. All right. Audience at home, it's Resident Evil 7, Sayonara Wild Hearts, CrossCode, BioShock Remastered, and Yeast 8, Lacrimosa of Dana. So if you want to guess, pause the episode, and then I'm going to guess my guess, and then Jason will say what the answer is. Oh, fuck. This is hard. So I think it's a toss. For me, it's a toss-up between either Sayonara Wild Hearts or Resident Evil 7. I don't think it's CrossCode. I don't think it's BioShock Remastered. And I don't think it's Yeast. I'm going to say Sayonara Wild Hearts just because you played it like 3 times this year.
That would be correct. That seems like an...
Yeah, so I got it right?
Yeah.
Yay!
You had the top 2 in the right position, so...
Yeah, well, I was thinking, I'm like, okay, so like you liked CrossCode, but like you didn't like it as much, and BioShock you seem to like, and same, like you liked those 3, but you didn't seem to like them as much as the first 2 that you mentioned. So I'm like, okay, it's got to be between those 2. So it's like,
yeah, they're both games I played 3 times, mostly because Resident Evil 7 is really quick to play if you know where everything is.
Yeah, well, it's
easy. I mean, you knew that from when we were playing that. I'm like, you should go behind there, and you're like, how the fuck do you remember that there's ammo back there? I'm like, I played this like 3 times.
It's interesting to see that even with, because I'd say that the types of games we tend to play, they have some overlap, but I think that we complement each other in some regards, because I just like won't touch most RPGs. And there's like some other stuff that you play that I don't like. You play more, I think, AAA stuff than I do in general. But like,
yeah.
So like, it's very interesting to me that you also rate games that you've come back to multiple times very highly. Because that's like a big thing for me, is that if I play a game once, it's like okay. But if I come back to a game over and over and over again, that to me is like the thing where I'm like, okay, that means that this is a game I really enjoyed. So like, just as an example, I've played through A Hat in Time. I've played it for 55 hours. I think I've played it front to back 4 times now. That to me is a sign I was like, okay, I clearly really enjoy this game. Like Hollow Knight's a game that I played through at least twice. I think I played through it thrice. Monster Train is a game I picked up like 2 or 3 different times. Hades, I stopped playing it for a couple of weeks and then started playing it again back last year. I haven't picked it up again this year. Slay the Spire, I played on and off for like 3 years. Phantasy Strike, like I said, I picked it up on and off for 2.5 years. Strive has been a game that I like played a bunch of, and then I took a break while I was playing Stardew Valley for like 3 weeks, and then I came back to playing Guilty Gear Strive, and I'm like, oh baby. I was like huffing crack. It was so good.
and to mention, the only reason Hades is not on the list is because I'm not really done with it yet. It was when I started that, it was in the middle of moving essentially. So
yeah, that's fair. I wasn't gonna press you on that. That's fine. But yeah, no, it's very interesting to me that despite the fact that we tend to play very different games, you also, and you're like, man, I came back to this game and like played it 3 or 4 times. It's like, man, I must really enjoy this game. Just the fact that we have that in common is very interesting to me.
I think that makes sense in general. I mean, the Paper Mario, The 1,000-Year Door is a game that I've probably played at least 4 or 5 times. Tales of Symphonia is a game that I've played with a buddy in high school probably about 10 times, too many, but I enjoy that one quite a bit.
I think I actually played through the original Paper Mario more than Paper Mario The 1,000-Year Door.
I didn't like it as much.
So I played it first. I would say that 1,000-Year Door is more mechanically involved. First game's a lot more simplistic. Like, a lot more simplistic.
Yeah, that's very true. And
or like Mario
1,000-Year Door is the first one I played, so.
Oh yeah, then the first, like the original game is complete. Is going to be a complete wash because it's just a dumber version of the of 1,000-Year Door. Sunshine's a game I replay a lot for the same reason. Sonic Adventure 2 is complete garbage. I love that game so much. I replay that game every couple of years. Hell, I think I replayed it this year, except this time I played it on PC, which was weird because the buttons are in the wrong spot. I'm used to the GameCube controller for it, so the buttons, like the X and the Y button, are in the complete wrong ass spot.
Oh dear.
It messes with you a little bit when you're used to using a specific controller for a game and you have the muscle memory for that from like over 10 years of playing in your head, and you're like, what is happening here?
Having to rewire your brain doesn't work.
Yeah, it's kind of like with fighting games. They're the same way, where it's like you get used to playing them a very specific way, and then when you get to switch it, you're like, what? But there you go. There are our games of the year for 2021. As I said, I'm going to have a few others that I didn't talk about. Tickle your curiosity there to come check out the article that will go live probably like a week after this podcast goes up. So check that out. I might have more detailed or maybe more coherent versions of some of what you've already heard, plus some extra games that came out from previous years. I'm sure there will be no surprises. I tend to feel like I'm a pretty consistent person. I feel like a lot of what my top games that I enjoy in a year are very predictable because of that, as long as you are at least vaguely familiar with what I played in the year.
I'm just happy that I got at least one game I recommended on that list.
Oh, yeah, you did.
That will not be mentioned, because you should go read that when it's out.
You should go read the post when it's out. I'll mention it again, probably because we're going to be recording again shortly after it goes live. So, but yeah, that was, I don't know. In general, I feel like 2021 was a pretty okay year. I didn't pick up a whole lot of games that came out this year because I had Chives and she was very expensive. So I tended to stick towards games that were older, that were cheaper, because I was paying out the ass for vet bills every month for a couple of months there.
Yeah.
Don't feel bad for me. I could afford it. Like, just don't feel like, oh man, it's unfortunate. It's like I could afford it, otherwise I wouldn't have adopted a fucking cat that clearly had something wrong with it. But at the same time, it's like, okay, well, I just spent a bunch of money on the cat. I want to spend more money on games, so I tended to stick to cheaper, older stuff. I think in the back half of the year, the only like new game I bought was Guilty Gear Strive, and that's because you and Miranda told me to buy it so that I would shut the fuck up about it. Little did you know that by buying it, I would just talk about it more. Except instead of talking about how much I wanted to play it, I would talk about why I was enjoying it. I don't think
those are the words that I use. Don't.
That's roughly what happened.
I said you sure sound interested in Guilty Gear Strive. Oh, it's on sale is what I said, I think, too.
Yeah, well. But yeah, I don't know. In general, I feel like everyone got a little bit something that they wanted this year. You might have had to go to the indie scene to find a lot of it, but that's pretty consistent, I would say, with most years. The only people who I think would probably be upset were people who were expecting something big from Sony, because Sony did, to the best of my knowledge, absolutely nothing all year. Is that
Ratchet and Clank and the Returnal game.
So they did absolutely nothing all year.
Big ones.
No, so
they are starting off strong next year, though.
Yeah, I was gonna say Returnal hit the right notes for some people. I just always feel like it's really pretentious when a AAA budget game comes out and parades around like they invented a concept that the indie games scene has been using and thriving with for a very long time. So like it's the game that was released in 2021, and I feel like the most influential roguelike in modern history is The Binding of Isaac, which came out in 2011. You're coming out a decade late and then acting like you're like, no, get the fuck out of here. And then Sprocket and Clonk is just like Child Doom, but less involved and less interesting.
I don't think
I'm talking shit on that game despite not having played it. I don't know, if Ratchet and Clank ever comes out on PC, I might try it, but every time I look at that game, I'm like, this just looks like it looks pretty, but it looks like it's all flash and no substance. because I don't know. It's just like a lot of. I said it a lot. There's a lot of shooting in that game, and it doesn't look like really interesting shooting, which might confuse some people who find shooters really boring, but like Doom's shooting is very interesting because of the way that the enemies work and how the different guns function and like how the levels are designed. And when I see a game where you just kind of like generally shoot in the direction of enemies and you just unload on them, I'm like, this looks kind of boring. Like, it's flashy, but it looks like if you did this for any amount of time, it would get really stale really quickly.
Yeah, that's fair.
But yeah, did you have any other closing remarks?
I'm done with this year, so.
Okay, fuck this year.
No outro. That's it. Bye-bye, everyone.
What? No, we gotta plug our shit.
Thank you all very much for joining us this last episode of the Frosty Canucks podcast for the year of 2021. Save us in 2022. When Rise is going to take over the entire podcast for 3 episodes in a row.
Rise! 2022, baby! Rise! Finally! On an adult controller on a system that can actually run it at 60 FPS.
But you can follow this podcast on Anchor, Stitcher, Spotify,
Spoofy,
Apple, and on YouTube. And you can follow the Frosty Canucks on Twitter at the Frosty Canucks. You can follow myself at Javamanimation. I have recently determined what art style I'm going to finally go with, and now it's just going to be a lot of practice. So I don't know when that's going to start showing results, but yeah. And Steve, your stuff.
You can find all of my shit at FrostyLate on Twitter. That's where I go to post the things. If you just want the art, even though I've been doing dick all art, you can follow me at FrostyLate on Instagram. Where I've put most of the time is on the blog. That's frostylate.ca. I've not really been doing a whole lot there, but definitely go check out that Wildermyth article I wrote. I think that it should maybe do a better job of selling you on the game than what I explained here, strictly because it's more organized since it was edited instead of spoken out of my mouth hole. Generally, and then obviously I've got the top of the best games of the year and probably the worst games of the year because that always does too well for me to... Yeah, it always does so well that I can't not do it.
People love hate.
Yeah, I don't know, but this year I quit playing games. Like, I bounced off of games that I was not enjoying at all so fast that I didn't get to the point where I actually, like, hated them. So I don't know what to do for, like, the bottom 5 games of the year. Because there's, like, some games on the list of games that I just dropped playing entirely that I feel like if I'd played any longer, I would just despise them. But because I dropped them so quickly, I don't really have an opinion on them. Except for the fact that, like, whatever made me bounce off of them was, like, very not great. Anyway, that's something you can look forward to in the new year. As well as, there's no way I'm putting, like, it's almost Christmas. No one fucking reads my blog around Christmas. So I'm, like, not putting it, there's a Guilty Gear Strive review I want to put together, which is just going to be me talking about Guilty Gear for, like, 2,000 words. That'll be something to check out in the new year as well. But, I don't know, you can read some of the stuff I got backlogged. I wrote a couple of very, I would say, interesting articles about fighting game related stuff this year as well. So yeah, go check out the blog, frostylate.ca. It's good shit.
Mm-hmm. And thank you all very much for joining us for the whole year of 2021. And
yes. Thank you all.
And we'll see you in the new year. And above all, stay frosty.